Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to another Ecosystem Business Summit. Chip Rogers, Chief Partner Officer at WorkSpan, and we are just letting people in, just opened up the session. So while people are gathering, grab a cup of coffee and we'll be back in about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. See you in a minute. Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to another Ecosystem Business Summit. We have a great session lined up today, jam-packed, so let's just jump in. Actually, before we jump in, I want to say we're all waking up to the just devastating effects of Hurricane Milton and Helene earlier, and there's so many people that are in just really having challenges this morning, and our friends in Florida and the South, and our hearts go out to everyone. Our thoughts are with you. So let's get started. So we have like I said, we have a great session coming up, and we have a lot of many of our friends and colleagues are joined today. Here's just some of the logos, some of the companies that people are joining from today across the technology, software, Gen AI, global system integrators, and a lot of our friends and colleagues are here today. So just welcome everyone. A couple of housekeeping items. When you your photo to your profile, when you ask questions, if we'll actually put your question up in the during the session, and if your photo's in there, we'll get to see you. Introduce yourself. Let us know where you're coming from, what your role is. We'll keep the chat lively during the whole session. If anyone's been to a previous EBS, we keep it. We really like to keep the chat going. Ask your questions right in chat. You can also actually ask questions in LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. And we're going to have a couple of polls. We have a poll up actually right now, so love to hear your thoughts about a few things. A couple of times during the session, we're going to have some polls up, and in the everything's going to happen right in the stage tab, so you can stay right there, and that's where the event is happening. Okay, our lineup. We are going to start up with Amit Sinha. Amit is our president and co-founder of WorkSpan. Really interesting. Going to be talking about. We've just been doing some prep sessions, and it's just really going to set the stage for the day. Talking all about planning and what does it mean for planning, and how can you engage your organization to make sure that you're successful in 2025. And then Dan McAllister, who's Senior VP of Alliances and Channels at Boomi. We'll have a fireside chat, and Dan and Amit are going to talk about the strategic element of planning, and how you should be thinking about things strategically, again, to set the stage for 2025. Rohan Batra, head of global partnerships for Pigment, is going to be joining with Puneet Mittal. Puneet is our CFO and also COO at WorkSpan, and Rohan and Puneet are going to be talking about translating that strategy into operationalized plans. And then we're going to wrap it all up with Asher, our CEO and co-founder of Partnership Leaders, is going to lead a session with Alina Everett, Global Strategic Alliances for PwC at Icertis, and then Parvez, Head of Strategic Channels and Alliances at QA. And I'll wrap it up at the end we'll do a little bit of a wrap up on the day, and then we'll go from there. So I think with that, oh great, Amit we'll kick it off with Amit. Amit, let's bring you in. There he is. Amit, you're on mute, actually. Oh, there
Thank
you
you,
go.
Chip. What a pleasure. Thank you for hosting this. We've been hosting this for 10 plus years now. It's a joy to get the whole community together, put your names in, ask your questions, engage with each other as well as we go through this. So one of the aspects that Greg Saraf, how do partner leaders get to the seat at the executive seat and table? And when they get there, one of the strategic things they do is plan the strategy and develop an annual plan. And this is where the annual planning cycle can be very stressful. This is the time where predictions are rife. This is where you have to really predict when is spring coming. The idea here is that you have to not only think about the strategic opportunity in front of you as a larger ecosystem, but also think about your team, how you mentally think about the entire year flowing out from the opportunity that you have to how you will execute and capture it. So we get that. Planning can be very uncomfortable. And there are various things that go into it. The macro is the macro, you can't control it. Outside things would happen. We would not realize COVID. We would not see the Ukraine war. We don't see the interest rate challenges that came our way. But at the same time, companies that did well throughout the planning cycle and execution cycle, they outgrew the competition dramatically. The other piece is alignment is hard. It's not just alignment between the business strategy with your CEO, but also with the execution team. It's not only with the CFO on the cost and the budget for your team, but also with the other peers that you have around the table that you are sitting on. This is alignment with sales. This is alignment with marketing. This is alignment with product, because partnering is one of the functions that touches through co-innovation with the product side, through co-marketing with the marketing side, through co-selling with the sales side. And ultimately, all of this has to make sense financially with the CFO joining your planning cycle. And lastly, the stakes are very high, and not just for companies, because we know that companies that do well in ecosystems tremendously outperform others that don't. So somebody's going to eat your lunch if this is not done well. Not only for the companies, but also for individuals. We as partner professionals, we put our careers out there, our team's careers out there, our team size out there, and we have to justify that. We have to ensure that there's a high return on value. So hard macro alignment, stakes are high, planning can be uncomfortable. But at the same time, this is also an opportunity. This is an opportunity to, see the overall partnership landscape and see where you want to play. For example, take the demand from the Gen AI ecosystem. The stacks are deep. There are more opportunities to now partner, especially with the advent of LLMs, with the advent of new Gen AI applications, with the consulting process around data. There's more opportunities to actually coordinate and co-sell and win for better outcomes together. And you can see this reflected in the cloud commitments that are rising. It is expected that the cloud commitments with the top 3 hyperscalers will be around $590 billion by 2028. Huge number, huge piggy bank right there. And of that portion, Canalys, Jay McBain has this prediction out there. By 2027, marketplace transactions will be $85 billion. This has been growing 5-year CAGR at 85%. And it's a huge opportunity to align your ecosystem to the hyperscaler motion. And by the way, this is just one opportunity of many that is happening in the ecosystem world. And what's even more interesting is that it's no longer bilateral opportunities going back and forth. So your planning cycle should also include interdependently the channel partners. And if you look at the channel partner private offer or multi-partner offers, 50% of all marketplace transactions, and this is the piece that is exponentially growing, the channel is actually joining the ecosystem motion. Previously, we had thought that the channel would be disintermediated by marketplaces, but the reverse is actually happening. They're joining massively in the marketplaces and using marketplace as the transaction vehicle. So huge opportunity for multi-partner collaboration as well. And as we have seen, if the planning and the execution is done right, and this is a study from EY with my good friend Greg Sarafin there, companies that orchestrate their ecosystems better than their peers, they grow revenue 2.1x more, and they actually have 1.5x lower cost, essentially a 4x more advantage. So there's a huge opportunity just to get the right planning and the right execution done. Now, what do we need to do to kind of plan better and bet on this partner-led growth? Companies do a very good job in terms of doing, sales planning, for example, as part of their annual cycle. So marketing plan, it's a marketing plan with neatly laid out calendar of events and campaigns that you might do. But partner planning, especially in the community we've been discussing with GTM leaders on LinkedIn, this has been hard. People actually don't know what are the best practices in partnering. How do you plan for a reseller patch? How do you work with hyperscalers, especially given the last slide that I shared around the 85 billion marketplace opportunity? How do you do your annual planning with a cloud partner? There are very good templates available with strategic collaboration agreements and SPAs, and we'll share one of them in this call. Similarly, there are opportunities with GSIs because you can do account planning like no other with GSIs. And all with all the Gen AI applications coming in, they are the ones driving the new wave of OEMs happening, because each layer in the Gen AI application stack is essentially an OEM opportunity for somebody higher up. So all of these interdependent pieces are playing. And if you're planning on partner-led growth, you'll have to think about these pieces interdependently and plan for the next year. So this is something that goes into your annual planning cycle. So what are the elements of the partner-led growth, and how should you think about this? So first and foremost is a multi-year partnering strategy. This is where you get the seat at the table, discuss with the board, discuss with the CEO what your plan strategy is as a company using the ecosystem market. Remember the 4x multiplier that you get. Strategy is important. But then it is about breaking it up into an annual plan. This is where the planning cycle is so critical, because you have to plan interdependently with different functions, sales, marketing, and product that we described, but also lay out in concrete terms what will be achieved through the execution, the results. And if you think about this whole cycle of what is the impact that partnering organizations bring, and then measure it in QBRs, month after month, quarter after quarter, in alignment with the annual plan, one of the key things is metrics. So as part of the annual planning cycle, agree on the metrics that you want to be measured on. And this could be around influence revenue, source revenue. This could be around win rates with partner ecosystems. It could be around market introductions and mind share. The plan should have those metrics that you care about. But at the same time, once you have the planning cycle done, you come into the execution side of things. And this is where the idea of a partner revenue flow to meet those annual plan goals is very, very important. So I'll give you one very simple example. Most companies went to the cloud. There is as you sell cloud contracts, one of the key things is getting people adopted and renewed every year. So let's say your annual plan calls out for increasing the renewal rates by 10%. How can partnering help with that? We know that there is partner record. So let's say a channel partner, we'll talk about that example very soon. They need to be part of this, automated renewals, if you will. And there's a specific partner revenue flow that we'll talk about that kind of helps you with that. And now you can track the uptick in renewals actually affected by partners. So that's an example of an end-to-end strategy where there is a strategy around cloud and cloud adoption. There's a plan around increasing renewals, and there's an execution with a partner revenue flow explicitly designed and measured to actually achieve that revenue flow. So let's break it down even further. So as leaders, one of the key things is we lead on partner strategy. Uh, Take the renewal example again. But we see that it's been a challenge. Why? Because anybody who has kids who's played football, I used to coach one for my son's team and my daughter's team as well. And you see people all running to the ball at the same time, and it feels that everybody means well, but it's chaotic. It's people are not playing their role, their part, and hence not dividing and conquering and not attending to all parts of the ecosystem. It feels like everybody's converged on one thing, which is where is the opportunities that partners have brought us, which is the ball. But on the other side, if done well, if you lead well, it feels very cohesive. It feels like the OEM team, the GSI team, the cloud team, together with the sales organizations, together with the regional plans and the territory plans at the account level, feels organized. You're playing to a playbook. And that's where the leadership shines. So, first and foremost, lead on the partner strategy by calling out three simple things. Number one, what's the opportunity? What's the strategic plan that the company needs to execute on? Then crystallize the vision. What are the key parts of the strategy where you can affect the business metrics moving in the right direction? And then doggedly lead those initiatives in the company, whether it's around renewals, whether it's around net new, whether it's around a new product introduction, especially in the Gen AI space. That vision that you've crystallized in pursuit of that opportunity, lead the partner revenue flow process across the end-to-end planning cycle. So that's number one. Number two is now we come to a plan. Let's say here's an example of a cloud sales partnership plan. So if you, by the way, feel free to download this QR code. This is one of those best practices that you get to do on WorkSpan. So the key part here is, let's say one of the strategies is to grow with the hyperscalers as we described in pursuit of the 85 million. So you may have a multi-year strategy to do that. This is an example of something that you would work with sales with. So this original revenue plan that you came together with sales called out for $90 million, for example. But then when you overlay your co-sell planning and what the partnering team can bring to bear, given the resource investment and the tech investment that's going to happen, you can see that with this collaborative execution, you can actually grow the pipeline by 52 million by affecting the net inflow, the inbound leads and the outbound opportunities, AOs and POs in AWS's case, or with Google or with Microsoft. You can have that bump where the partnership team can add an incremental $52.9 million in 2 years, and that will result in $20.3 more million in terms of end revenue. So this is very concrete. You can break it down by region, you can break it down by marketplace offers and things like that in this planning cycle. The other important piece to note is, because it's a multi-year plan, what you're promising in this next 1 year, for example, is this will result in an incremental $4.5 million. And this is not just, with this incremental planning, 4.5 is really good, but look at what happens next year. So having that sight, what you build in year one, that will become the base for next year's growth as well. So overall planning, you can see that the 20.3 million happens because of this business plan that you have, that you're pursuing. And things like this is actually what goes into a strategic collaboration agreement or a strategic planning agreement with cloud hyperscalers. Every cloud partnership team should do this. And we just don't talk in terms of strategy and put it on a spreadsheet. We actually do it on WorkSpan and put it as part of your partner revenue plan. So this is packaged. If you guys are working with the hyperscalers, you can actually put that strategic plan in terms of goals and metrics, in terms of inbound referrals and outbound referrals and win rates and actual pipeline and revenue on WorkSpan and lead the business planning cycle, especially at the start of this year. Now, as I mentioned, planning is one thing. Getting there and executing it and actually achieving the business plan is a whole lot different. And this is where having tight partner revenue flows, a set of business actions that are necessary, a set of business steps that you perform that is repeatable, can be organized, can be measured, is really, really important. So if you set your team down a path of things where they have to figure out the steps, then they take so much time figuring out the steps, and every partner feels bespoke and different. But you have a best practice, a way to actually drive partner revenue flows in pursuit of your plan. That's where it shines. There are three new flows that we've seen in the industry. This has been crystallized in the last, I would say, 1 year, working with a lot of innovators in this space. So first, marketplace customer lifecycle automation. Secondly is the AI accelerated cloud co-sell. And lastly, the reverse deal registration, or using the channel to grow renewal rates. All these three best practices are packaged workflows that we sell with our co-sell application on WorkSpan. So something that you can really try and use. So let's take the marketplace lifecycle automation. So this is an end-to-end customer lifecycle automation. Example of a really powerful infrastructure data AI scale-up company. They set up a great flow with the cloud marketplaces. They were doing 5x more pipelines and approaching $1 billion in marketplaces, right? A marketplace-driven revenue. This particular company, what they did was end-to-end revenue flow. One of the key areas of collaboration identified with the customer was the integration of a CPQ system, which is the configure price quote system, alongside with the partner marketplace's private offer process. So you have your own quote process. The marketplace has their own private offer process. Imagining a workflow that actually takes a CPQ quote, gives the approved quotes, there's a workflow to approve the quotes, and then that automatically shows up as private offers that end customers sign on a marketplace of your choice. Now, this integration, if enabled well, right, you can imagine the flywheel and how quickly it can move. So this is an example with MongoDB that we did, and it is a very, very powerful example of something that was set up and that is about to scale. Now, once this scale has been set up with the CPQ integration, you can try new things. For example, PLG triggers, free trials converting into marketplace sales motions, or automatically doing renewals. So imagine if a new renewal transaction is coming through, because of the CPQ integration, the renewal quotes are ready and they are automatically triggered. So a huge example with regard to picking a strategy with marketplace. The business strategy around PLG is enabled through this partner revenue flow. The business strategy that was planned with regard to renewal is enabled through this flow. And now you can measure the system as well as to how much incremental revenue is coming out of this thing. Let's take another example, AI accelerated cloud co-sell. So we are very familiar with this process. Imagine a global security company working with a cloud hyperscaler. You are doing efficiently your co-sell process. Inbound referrals are coming in, outbound referrals are going out from the hyperscaler coming to you, and you're using the marketplace for private offer directly with your customers. A huge flow. Now here, one of the interesting things is when a hyperscaler sends an opportunity to you, they attach an account. And what if this account can be matched using AI to your account master? Now, this process would take 2 weeks or more to do across thousands of accounts. What if it can be done instantaneously? What if it can be done within a day? This creates new opportunities for teaming at the account level with the cloud hyperscalers, especially with data such as propensity. This has become very, very critical in the industry. So net new process around how can the cloud co-sell process be accelerated with AI, especially with account matching with data, including propensity data. So another revenue flow, at this time at the account level, so that you can plan accounts and territories together. And lastly, let's look at the channel protected renewal rates use case. This is also known as reverse deal registration. The way it works is currently companies working with its reseller network reaching out to customers. But because all of these products are cloud-based products, typically resellers would register a deal on their partner portal with this company, and as they sell the deal, that's great. Deal registration systems have been working fine for years. There are some challenges, but this process works really well. At the end of the day, these cloud revenue needs to be renewed, And what you see is now now as the host company, what you can do is take those opportunities that had closed for the second year, the renewal. You do a reverse deal registration to the reseller. So this is where the reseller gets flagged and says, you know what, this renewal is coming through. Let me bring you in back so that we can actually do the renewal quickly, because you're the last mile. You are embedded with the customer. You have CX practices that you have built out, protecting that revenue. And heck, there might be even incentives associated with it. So this reverse deal registration flow is bringing back the channel into agreement-based offers and things like that very, very quickly, and hence affects the strategy that you laid out around renewals. And the plan actually includes to include the reseller into this problem process pack, and then you have this automated flow that you can measure. And this is certainly one of those new flows that is now powered by WorkSpan. So let's kind of crystallize this very quickly. There is, when you plan for the partner-led revenue growth, the partnering strategy is very, very key. This is aligned to the company strategy. It's one and the same. The company's revenue growth strategy is equal to the ecosystem strategy. Next step, as we saw, was we broke down the strategy into partner plans. If the partner strategy called out for net new or renewal rates, or called out for new product introductions with the cloud, especially with Gen AI, that's included in the partner plan. The partner plan is broken down by territories, by regions, by accounts. And as part of that plan, when you overlay working with sales, what is the incremental pipeline, incremental revenue that the partnering team can add? Partnering becomes central to how revenue generation happens. It's not something that is an afterthought. It's something that was generated as a shared plan. There's a buy-in from the CRO as a result of this. There's a buy-in at the CEO level. And then you also set the expectation that, look, there should be confidence in our plan as a partnering leader, because we as a partnering organization know how to execute this. There's a standard operating process for it. There's a partner revenue flow that will actually get you the renewal rates that we promised, that will actually get you the new product launch, milestones to be met sooner, that will get you the net new revenue that we promised, or new logos that we promised sooner, because we have a specific partner revenue flow that we have digitized. And this is where the ground game is important. This is where the execution actually happens. And having a shared system with your partner, with your ecosystem partner, be they ISVs, GSIs, hyperscalers, you have a shared system of execution where you are looking at that shared revenue flow, if you will, and measuring with the metrics that you agreed as part of the partner planning cycle. And these are best practice metrics for each revenue flow. For example, on the hyperscaler revenue flow, you want to measure how many private offers got closed. You want to measure what was the inbound opportunities coming in from the hyperscaler, what was the outbound, what's the ratio between the two, how are the win rates. And this is where the partnering team stands confidently before the board and defends their plan. And in year one of doing this successfully with companies, these partner leaders develop the reputation amongst the board that, yes, this partnering organization can prepare a plan, can stand by the plan, can deliver the plan, and hence needs to be trusted year after year with the right team and the right budget and the right empowerment and right seat at the table, so that you can actually achieve the company goals that we all set out to do. Fantastic examples. WorkSpan has had the privilege of working with the 3 examples that I brought together. One with Palo Alto Networks on AI account matching, with MongoDB around accelerated with the marketplaces. They grew 5x in terms of revenue, in terms of pipeline with AWS as an example, but doing really well with MongoDB, and Microsoft and also Google. You see an entire ecosystem play there. And now Mongo is going on with their MongoDB AI application program as well, engaging other ecosystem types like ISVs and GSIs in this motion. Another example is Boomi. I'm going to be speaking with Dan in a few minutes. Boomi has led a stellar example with AWS. What a great play in terms of innovating around AI, working with AWS, and creating a plan that really tracks not just net new, but also renewals through this channel. And it's a huge effort. Joe Estes and team, they've done a phenomenal job with AWS driving this strategic plan together so that the eventual revenue can be captured. And lastly, if you look at the execution side of things, the role of partner operations in standardizing these partner revenue flows and providing the business metrics and the QBR plans, the reports in a box for each partner revenue flow has been critical in showing the impact that we have. So that's the net piece here that I wanted to share with the community here. Uh, Next year is super important from a partner revenue point of view. Uh, Partner-led revenue growth is real. Companies have seen massive explosion, 4x increase in pipeline and revenue impact compared to others. And this is the time to engage in the partner planning process. It's a time of uncertainty, but also October, November, December is when new plans are laid out, and those plans get approved, and teams get funded, budgets gets handed down. But at the same time, it's also an opportunity to share what the partnering team can actually deliver. So very excited with this framework. There's a lot of assets that are coming and good discussions happening next that you will take away from. With that, Chip, I want to hand it back to you.
Fantastic. That was terrific, Amit, and really appreciate you taking us through all that. That was great. Really set the stage for the day, and so many great examples and models to talk through. So fantastic. So gosh, let's bring Dan in.
Thanks, guys. Like magic.
That's okay. I'm going to step out and let you guys take it away.
Absolutely. Hey, Dan, thank you for joining us. Boomi has been a great partner to us, but also to the industry. So kudos for everything you do. Dan McAllister, Senior VP, Alliances and Channels at Boomi. So warm welcome from the community to you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Amit. I really appreciate it. Happy to be here, and yeah, look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. One of the joys, Dan, is back at SAP early on in my career, who I used to work with Steve Lucas and for Steve Lucas. We share a common boss. You share a seat at the table with him as the leader at Boomi. Give us a sense of what Steve is like.
Steve is an amazing executive and amazing individual. Really, I met Steve 25 years ago, which neither one of us like to admit. We had more and darker hair at the time, but great technologist, great leader, visionary, and an amazing amount of energy. I will say any company I've worked at with him, it's been a few, some through acquisition into SAP, at Crystal, Business Object, SAP, and then now here at Boomi, there's this backstage arm wrestling match between the rest of the people who have to follow Steve. Nobody wants to do it because he's such an amazing speaker and does a great job. So I've lost that a few times, unfortunately, and had to be right after such a great presenter. But no, awesome to work for him, and I love being part of the Boomi staff.
Yeah, what an amazing guy in terms of energy. And when I was leaving SAP to start WorkSpan, he was one of the first people I told this to, and he said, "Here's a check, go do it." So that's been phenomenal for us here at WorkSpan. I want to kick this off with Boomi. Talk a little bit about what is Boomi's partnering strategy before we get to the annual planning piece. Give us a sense of what is the strategy now at Boomi.
Yeah, sure. I think we can tie it pretty easily to the planning process, because the strategy we have is really about execution of a multi-year plan, right? And I think it should be that way ultimately. But at a high enough level, we want to partner with all of the companies that surround our customers, right? And then it's going to include systems integrators, hyperscalers. By the way, great job detailing that relatively new part of the ecosystem. Distributors and other ISVs, of course, and we've publicly announced many of these. Recently, a very impactful one that we're very proud of is the ServiceNow partnership that we have at Boomi. Is great access to the enterprise, great endorsement of our API management solutions and all the things we're doing there, as well as future plans we have around AI, et cetera. But what we ultimately do with these partnerships is we surround them with all of the cross-functional teams that are within Boomi. And so for me, that's like a multi-part strategy. There's three components to it. There's the customer life cycle, the partner life cycle, and then the territory coverage. And happy to go into any one of those and how we cover it.
Yeah, we'll double click on that in a second. But give us a sense. Was partnering always a first class citizen at Boomi? Were there people who kind of were naysayers, hated the partnering team or organization or the whole process? Give us a sense how that felt.
Sure. Well, I can only speak to about a year and a half worth of history at Boomi. That's where I was, or that's when I joined. Before that, I was outside the firewall, had no access inside because I was at a large competitor of theirs.
Okay. Yeah.
And MuleSoft, where I led the channels organization for about 7 years in those teams. And so, but where we are now, and one of the things that was important to me about joining was, first of all, you touched on this in your discussion about having that trust and credibility. Making sure that the rest of the e-staff and leaders within the organization, multi-level, not just the e-staff, believed in partners as a critical component to how we can achieve success. And there's a great article that I read a long time ago, and the title stuck with me. The execution of it I've lost, but the title was amazing. And then it said, everybody wants a great channels program, but nobody knows what it is. And I think that's true, right? Because if they don't do it every day, why would they, right? And so it's up to us, incumbent on us to kind of teach them and reinforce those messages all the time, and make sure that anyone who's had a bad experience with partners in the past, or maybe isn't familiar with them or doesn't do it day to day like we do, you bring them on board. And you have this, shared understanding of the value that you can deliver to their part of the organization.
Awesome. Now let's talk a little bit about partner planning. This is the whole EBS is focused on that. Sure. How does Boomi go about doing its annual partner plan? Take us inside. What does it feel like? How do you do it? Share some secrets, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll leave the metrics out, but I will, go into the strategy and how I think about partners, which is, I've done this at a few organizations, and luckily enough, it translates here as well. I generally have 3 components of my program, right? There's the customer lifecycle, the partner lifecycle, and then ultimately the territory coverage, how you execute on that plan. But to me, it really all starts with the customer lifecycle, and probably the most important part, because if you get this wrong, you're not going to have the organizational support behind you, which you need to ultimately execute on the plan. And so generally we think about everyone in the organization needs to understand their role in the customer lifecycle. And most do, if you're lead development, if you're sales, if you're delivery, if you're customer success, you have a defined component, that you stay within. Interesting thing about partners, and probably why we all love it, is that we transverse all of those, right? And certainly why I love it is because you get to work on the entire customer life cycle. But then you need to go to all these cross-functional leaders and help them understand, how does channels relate to them? Because it may just be enter and exit multiple times in this process. And not only do they have to understand it, but they have to understand how it impacts them. And there has to be a measure, probably some type of co-commitment beyond the handshake, on what you're willing to do for them on an annual basis or a quarterly basis, depending on how that team, has their own goals. And easy enough for sales, I think we get that. I think easy enough for maybe, demand creation and marketing. I think many of us do that. Not so much when you get into, services and customer success. And those are some things that we really stress here, is that how do we engage collaboratively? How do we, what is that metric? What is the handshake between those parts of the organization and channels, so that ultimately we drive not only, the great revenue impact, which you had some great data on, which I want to get from you later, but also, like, how do you drive adoption, and customer success throughout that, so that ultimately becomes a flywheel effect and starts all over again with more great opportunities to drive expansion together. So to me, that's some of the most important components, of the strategy, and happy to go into more detail on any of those if you want me to.
Dan, I love this vision around and your execution, frankly, around how the customer lifecycle and the partner lifecycle intersect. Great organizations that we've seen, for example, at Cisco, they're able to do the entire customer lifecycle journey from purchase all the way to go live, to measuring the adoption, and then renewal, and then intersecting the partner touch points. And you seem to have done that as well, at which much success. I wanted to ask you a double click on that. As you're doing this, does it differ across partner types, like a GSI, a service provider, or a channel partner, or a hyperscaler? Give us a sense of the difference.
Yeah, for sure it does. So in the partner lifecycle, how I would think of that in kind of pillar 2 would be, you have to go recruit, you have to go ramped, you have to mature them, and you have to create locked-in, partnerships that are co-committed. And so, where they're common is probably following that path. And then also where they're common is you have to think about what helps you build a sustainable business with those partnerships. Because if
Mhm.
it's just about a referral fee or it's just about something like that, it's not really lasting. I call that a empty calories or a sugar rush. In that, great, I gave you a bag of cash, you're happy about that, but what keeps you working with us in the future? If you're concerned more about growing your presence and stickiness inside your account, finding new opportunities, expanding your wallet share, then that's more interesting. And so that would apply a number of different ways to the different partnerships that you deal with. Maybe that is just about facilitating a margin, a reseller or distributor. There are companies that are amazing at that we partner with because they're so good at it. Carosoft in public sector, for example, comes to mind.
Yeah.
That they do many, many things. Much of that value is helping you decipher the public sector ecosystem, right?
Mhm.
Then you might have GSIs, which we're all familiar, and they're thinking, decades-long strategies in their accounts,
Mhm.
hundreds of millions of dollars, not the 100K, the 200K, the $1 million that your ISV may be selling. And so you have to think, work with them about not only, is this transaction important, but how does that de-risk the rest of your portfolio business within that account? How does that lead to more business? And we're fortunate enough being in the integration and automation space that we do that very well, right? There's a huge services drag. And then when you think about maybe smaller SIs or ISV partnerships, how do you make them more sticky in the accounts? Where can you give them more opportunities as well? Again, it can't just be about the one transaction. It has to be about building a sustainable business. But each of those partner types certainly has a different view of what success is. And you have to adapt your model and your cross-functional alignment and support based on what needs they have and what interests they have, is the way I think about it.
Fantastic. And as you're doing this, if we look at the new pieces, like year after year, it's not the same thing, right? Your plans will change. For example, this year is there's a lot of AI, right? So how do you introduce something new, like, hey, the whole company is doing something around AI, making money, working with customers, innovating? How does that intersect the planning cycle?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think that there's always good opportunities to be in partnerships, and in channels. It's always an exciting part of the business. Certainly, even in normal times, setting up these relationships, running them, out executing, learn how to do things better, removing the grit out of the machinery is always fun for me. But in market transformation times, times of disruption, which we're experiencing right now, based on all of the AI technology that's coming out, it's amazing. I'm seeing companies that were known to be fast followers, realizing that if we continue that strategy, it's going to increase the gap between us and the person leading in that. Everybody is out there trying a little harder, thinking about what bets they can make, because they're not sure if the bet they're making is going to be successful, but they know if they don't bet, they're for sure going to fall further behind because somebody will get it right. And so it's really an interesting time to partner. And beyond that, I think it's an interesting time to have multifaceted partners, which you talked about before, these multi-partner scenarios. I think that was difficult before, and it wasn't always that interesting. It was hard to find three sides ownership. Now it's like we realize, the potential and the need, to do it. So it's super important. So how does that relate to the planning cycle? Look, you've got to build some flexibility into your model.
Mhm.
I pride myself and my teams on being very efficient, very lean, not asking for too much, making sure that we can commit to the metrics that we outline for the organization, because without that, handshake and trust and deliver on those metrics, we don't have the credibility that earns us the investment dollars. So hopefully, if you do a good job on the first part of that, which is like building an executable model, having metrics that you can be accountable to, awesome. But then you've also got to build in, let's say 20% of your team to experiment. And that might look
Mhm.
like, for us in February, launching with an idea that we have, good reason to believe it will be successful, and finding out in August, July, somewhere later in the year, maybe it's not, and you have to be able to pivot. And I think that, understanding that and planning for that in your organization and willing to take some risks is important. And hopefully you've got the trust and credibility with the rest of the staff that they understand that not every bet, will pay off. But then the other is you've got to be a great manager and leader, because that may impact somebody on your team who's a great employee, who's got a lot of talent and a lot of knowledge, and you might have to pivot them mid-year or in either later in Q1 or in Q3 or somewhere during that calendar cycle. That may impact their comp plan. So you have to have people committed to the outcome as well. And I think that's maybe a different topic, but certainly an important one.
Absolutely. Now, I want to come back to the people side of things in a second. Talk a little bit about hyperscalers, because especially this year, and it has become very key part of planning with the hyperscalers. Your strategy, you are certainly very good at it. So, give us a sense of how does that plan? How do you plan with your team, your sales team, your innovation team? Because you're doing a co-innovating, you're marketing with them, you're selling with them. How does
Sure.
that plan look like?
Sure. We have made a commitment around AWS, and WorkSpan is a partner with us in that. And I didn't realize you could give us the information that you could. So I'm anxious to get some of that. You mentioned Joe Estes before. He'll get a call from me later today about how do we execute on some of that data. But in all seriousness, the partnership there has been very strong for us. Committing to one has been very beneficial. Certainly, we've had offers. Certainly, we've looked at others. As everybody should, make sure you're pursuing the best option. But the commitment around one has been great. It's helped us kind of punch above our weight. As proud of ourselves as we are for becoming a very large organization, we understand there are multi-billion-dollar organizations out there that are competing for time and energy, and so that was important for us to have enough critical mass behind one arrow, right? So that we could execute on something that was impactful, not only for us but for that partnership. And so that's helped us streamline our operations and have more impact there. And they've been a great partner in supporting us in the markets we go after. I'm continually impressed with the market reach and support they provide, as do the others, as I understand from peers of mine in the industry that work with the others, that they're just able to help us, again, kind of punch above our weight. And so without getting in all the details, what those numbers are, we've grown tremendously. I think you said there's an average growth of about 85%, if that was what you said.
Yep.
Right. I think last year we were over 150% growth. We're expecting that again this year. So it's paid off based on the investments we're making and they're making behind the partnership.
Absolutely. And it's really amazing to see your team also drive renewals through this channel. So very, very exciting. Congratulations on that 150% plus growth rate there.
Sure.
I want to come back to the team question. You lead a team, you inspire a team. People have careers bet on this thing. We want more people to come into the partnering profession, right? So how do you plan for your team as part of this planning cycle? What goes in it? Give us a sense of the people side of the equation.
Sure. I think certainly there's a coaching and a leadership aspect to it as well. There's also, in the metrics that you hand down to everybody as well. I think in building a great team and having a great team that, to surround you, it does start in the hiring process, right? And making sure that you've got people that are, committed to getting better. Everybody wants a promotion. Everybody wants a title change. Everybody wants a raise. Of course, I do as well. That's very understandable. But finding individuals who have it in their DNA makeup that I want to get better, beyond the paycheck, and I want to get better at what I do. And I've had some great managers over the years, in the past several companies that helped me understand that, and it's made me a better employee, but also I think a better coach. As I find those people and then bring them onto the team and then invest in them. Not just to get to the next, title milestone, but to doing the things that make that an obvious, right? Where it's a no-brainer that they get the next role when it becomes available. So that when you work with them, right, and you're giving them the skills, then when the job opens, well, it's obvious because they're already doing the things that earn them that title, promotion, et cetera. So I think that's really important. Under the number side of things, which I think is equally important to maintain the commitment of those people that you've brought into the organization. Hopefully you've made great hires, is ensuring there is, level of parity that is undeniable. And that means, avoiding the mistake of rewarding poor performance and punishing good performance. And so what that might look like, let's say you have two individuals, maybe even of equal talent, but one performs at 150% of plan and the other one does 50% of plan, right? So pretty big difference in how they performed. The easy answer is, well, company's got to grow 20%. Everybody gets a 20% of what they did last year, right? Horrible mistake, right? You have to make sure that there's some level of parity saying, was it the territory? Was it the individual? Was it what? And so maybe that person who did well above their plan, sure, they get a bit of an increase, but it's less than, the other person who's now got to, get up to average. So you want to make sure you've got everybody feeling like I'm not being penalized because I have a great year, because that's the easiest way to get rid of good people, right? Because they'll go someplace where they get a lower plan and then can
Yeah.
overachieve there, right? So you've got to give them a chance to maintain being an overachiever, right, on the number. And you've got to tell other people like, hey, sometimes I get it. Good years, bad years, things happen. You've got to catch up to the average and then help them do it, right? Give them the tools, give them the access, make sure you understand why that happened, but give them the access to get there. So I think, for me that I've talked about this many times is attach rate, attach rate to the sales organization as an easy revenue metric. And that should be relatively same, now the revenue numbers may be different from Southeast Asia to, the West Coast, of the US or North American markets because the dollar values, et cetera, but attach rate could be the same, right? The ratios between how many AEs you support if you're a BDM or a partner manager should be the same. And this way you've given people kind of a fair shot, and an even metric with which you can judge performance. So I think those few things have been successful for me in the past few companies I've been a part of.
Absolutely, Darren, this is very inspiring to hear. What I'm seeing more from leaders like you is this has become very similar to how sales does planning and rewards sales performance. Marketing does marketing performance and rewards marketing performance. Partnering was hard. Now with the way you are talking about this thing, this has become streamlined, a little bit more metric driven, a little bit more where people can actually build long-term careers and in the long run on the basis of their performance, at the end of the
That's
day,
right.
because there are metrics and measurements associated with this.
Yeah, I would have, 20 years ago when I guess it's been longer than that, but sometime in the past when I started in this role, they were looking for people who played golf, right?
Yeah.
Or had great social networks. I don't play golf, right? And so that is that a negative or can I outperform somebody who does from a business revenue and business metric standpoint was maybe the joke or thing I did to keep myself engaged, is to make sure that I wasn't discouraged by my golf score, so.
Let me ask you a hard question.
Sure.
If you think about your planning process and how you execute, what are some aspects that you find challenging that doesn't work or has friction laden in it?
I think if you've done a good job at the groundwork of what I talked about before about bringing in the cross-functional stakeholders, then it should be relatively or incrementally easier than if you haven't. But as light of I make of that, it's hard to do, right? Because not everybody is thinking about channels impact. They have their own pressures, and when you're talking to part of the organization that maybe it's a new leader, their priority may be like, look, I've got to figure out my organization, or I've got to fix this fire or this leaky bucket or do something else before I get to outside my organization, which is channels, which is another part of the business, which I don't understand. And so that part can be hard, right? And if that part of the organization, is struggling, maybe that's, they need a reason why. And things outside their organization they don't understand, and partners can become the reason why. So you have to work really hard, whether you have a formal handshake or metric between you two or not, to make sure you're always trying to build that bridge, because partners don't exist in a vacuum. Partnerships are not out on an island. You have to be great at cross-functional alignment, and not only just at the top but at the field. So something that might be easy to do is say, let's have a metric between, or an agreement between the channel leader and the services leader, right? That's very common in ISVs, right? And professional services and systems integrators are often find themselves butting heads. So the top may agree, but if it doesn't happen at the field level, the ICs, the people that are actually selling and winning deals, right? And then, that can be a problem. So it's got to be, impactful through the organization. You've got to work hard to make sure that your team does it as well as you do, right? Builds those bridges and builds the connectivity in the field, because that's where the power of the organization is if you've got great cross-functional alignment. You can have the best system in the world. If you don't have those relationships in the field, it's not going to work. And so we, as part of our strategy is, and many companies do this, we have field-based, what we call business development managers. Others have, but they are aligned specifically to sales regions. And in that sales region, the services organization usually has somebody aligned to that. The customer success organization usually has somebody aligned to that. The field, marketing team might have somebody aligned to that. And so I really stress to the team to become part of that roundtable that may exist in Atlanta or Texas or San Francisco or London, as opposed to thinking that it should come down from the ivory tower, to them, right, and be told what to do. It's like, no, you guys go build your plan. You have the flexibility and the power to implement it.
Yeah.
Guidelines, here's the expectation, right? But we want you to understand how that's going to work best in your region, and then ultimately, execute on it. So.
Fantastic, Dan. So it's not only the seat at the table at the leadership level, it's actually at the field level, account level.
The whole team.
everything
Yeah,
else
that's right. Yeah, that's a great point. The whole team has to have a seat at their own round table
on round tables. Yeah.
in the regions.
We've got some amazing questions, Dan. So why don't we bring Chip back in? Chip,
Sure.
such an engaging discussion on chat here happening.
Yeah, this has
What are some
been
questions people are asking? Can you?
fantastic. Yeah, some great. Well, I'll show this one from Ace Thrombley, but I think you just answered it actually, Dan. So, how do you make sure partner and sales teams are aligned on KPIs, especially when goals span across global regions? So, I think you kind of spoke to it about have a seat at the table. Are there any other things the ways that you
Yeah,
think?
I would just put a cross the i's and dot the i's and cross the t's on the attach rate. That's an easy way to have a sales metric. In each region that's fair for everybody and brings parity to the team. That says, hey, we've got to have I talk about 90% attach rate. In each sales territory. Other things are developing leads. Lead gen at the individual region. So that could be something like, hey, my number looks great at a global level, but region number 6 is way off. Right. Well, it doesn't. Maybe I get a pass, but I've got to go help that team member to make sure we're doing all the best practices to develop in that region. Right. So that they have to cascade down. It's not a team metric; it's an individual metric, which rolls up. But other things like services team, like that may be, hey, how many accounts are we partnering on? To have co-delivery or collaborative delivery. With customer success, that may be adoption rates or expansion rates. With partners in certain markets or territories, and I think that's important to ultimately filter down to the regions, because if it's not personal, it's probably not going to get done right at that level.
Yeah.
That's
And when
great.
you attach a partner, the win rates go up, right? So it really shows up in the numbers, but the input metric that you measure is the attach rate.
Win rates, and you should add this to your slide. Usually it's average sales price goes up.
Average sales for deal size as well.
So win rates for sure, double, 3, sometimes 4x is what we enjoy. But also, and because you're surrounding the customer with more people who have influence, right? Which is our job. But also the deal sizes often go up as well, which is two of the most important metrics we could hope for.
So this is not a question, but it's a comment from a friend of yours, Dan. From Joe.
There you go. Yeah, thanks, Joe. I was worried quota's going up next year, but no, he's doing an amazing job. It's a great partnership, and we've had others involved in it as well. Not to leave them out, but yeah, we've got a great partnership with AWS. We're enjoying it.
Yeah, terrific. Let's see. Ashish asks, here that customer lifecycle is a key part of your DNA. My question is, as you're working with AWS, how are you also bringing in the other, the GSIs, resellers, and other ISVs to work together?
Sure. I think the good news there is that AWS also has partnerships and reasons why they work with GSIs, and this is probably more generic to more than just AWS, but how do this multi-partnership scenarios work in. And what we look for is what is our value to that partnership and in how they go to market. What I don't need is another 1,000 people out there regurgitating the booming message or whatever company I represent. What I need them to do is take what we have, add value to what they deliver, and why the customer goes to those companies, be it an integrator, be it an ISV, be it AWS, et cetera, and help them deliver more value to those customers. And so if there's a reason why a GSI and a hyperscaler work together, oftentimes there's a way for us to add value to both of those and make that the 1 + 1 + 1 now equals 5 or 6 as opposed to 3.
Yeah. Sailesh has a similar related question, so I pose this as well. So talking about SIs in particular, the question here is, how do you bring them into renewals? Does that happen? Is there any specific thing you do there?
Or incentives or anything?
How do we bring them into renewals? Without, I want to go too far into our personal metrics on how we do that. I think what's important is that they have a role to play with the customer. And if they're delivering great outcomes, if they're driving adoption, I want alignment between my customer success organization, regardless of what company I represent, in my partners, in this case, the integrator community. There should be no disincentive, for them to work together on that. Generally, where incentives I've seen be lasting and most effective, for partners, let alone the CS, that should be separate. Is helping them build a sustainable business. Sometimes that involves making investments and helping them build their practice. But for an integrator, their truest concern is, how do I sell more services? That's what they exist for, right? And so the extra few percentage points, impactful, interesting, helps them make other investments, doesn't really build them a sustainable business, right? And so what I tend to do is try to direct those investments and make investments to help them get there. And that involves the coordination with not only my sellers, right, the demand creation and demand execution, but also the delivery. Because if the project goes poorly, then they're probably not going to get an expand in that account. And so that means aligning with my services organization. But then customer success is, while they're delivering, while they're going through that process, the most important thing to them is quick problem resolution, maybe just in time training, maybe support or best practices. And so the most valuable thing is not the spiff or as long as there's no disincentive, and they have access, then that's generally what I find is most impactful. So I tend to focus less on the dollars each team gets. I think as long as they're not misaligned, right, and encouraged not to work together, and we just encourage them to work together and give them access to each other and help facilitate the understanding of why that's important and how that can help each other, then often that leads to the greatest outcome.
Fantastic. I'll ask two questions related. I think we had a good discussion around metrics. Ryan is asking, what are some good metrics to measure partner professionals' performance? And then related to this, Mark is saying, what are some leading indicators versus trailing indicators? So if you have input metrics versus output metrics, that would be a good discussion then.
Yeah, sure. I think the easy one is revenue, right? There has to be revenue. In the rub there is attributable revenue, right? So there's two types. One is sourced revenue, right, generated by the partner, and then other where they provide influence to help you win, right? And so easy enough to say, you actually have to implement a process and a practice on determining that is auditable, right? And this is where a lot of teams I see fall off the map. If you don't have a very clear criteria, which by the way should be the same as your sales team has, right? If they go from 0 to 10%, 10 to 20, all the way up to 100 in closed win, why wouldn't you have that same criteria for your partners? And if they do those things, we've agreed their value. That's why we tell our sellers to do them. That's the value you can then associate to the partnership. So I think the metric has to be revenue. It has to be what it's attributed to, and you have to be committed to the number. You have to carry a quota. These are sales-driven roles, not the relationship goals that we were joking about before in the golf course. They have to be where you're actually delivering metrics that matter to the business. And so again, sales is the easy one. You can have others after that, and maybe that's with sales and marketing. That is lead development. That can be either number of leads or leads that actually make it to opportunity, where a sales rep is actually willing to forecast it. Right? To me, that's the ultimate measure. You can produce thousands of hundreds of millions of leads. If they don't ever make it to a point where somebody's willing to forecast it, it's irrelevant. So I tend to focus on that number. And frankly, if I had just one metric I could measure the team by, I'd pick that one. Because generally, if you produce enough opportunities that people will forecast, and good things happen after that, right? You're closing enough, you're influenced enough, you've earned that credibility, the hard part, so that now the rest of it often is, is invested in the program and give you what you need. But there are also things like certified practices as you get bigger and more advanced. And there are also, several others depending on it, but they have to matter. They have to be a little scary, for everybody, so that you're willing to stick your neck out a little bit, because that's how you earn the trust and credibility in the organization.
Fantastic. Dan, this has been an amazing discussion. What a body of work you've had across companies and now an impact at Boomi. Very inspiring. Thank you for spending your precious time with this community. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and you guys have been great partners to us. So I'm happy to support it. So
absolutely, Dan. We love working with the Boomi team on WorkSpan and across all your partnerships. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you, Dan. Amit, fantastic session. And we are going to go. Let's see. We have. Okay, there we go. We have a poll coming up here. Actually, we're presenting a poll on partner planning for partner-led growth. So please take a look at that and give us your thoughts. And with that, we're going to bring in Rohan. Rohan, let's bring you in. Hey, there you
Hey
are.
there. Wow.
Rohan. And Puneet as well. Hey, Puneet.
Hi, Chip. Thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna take it away and step out right now, and you guys have a great session.
Thanks, Chip.
Rohan, very nice to have you here. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me, Puneet.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just start with a brief introduction for the audience, and then we'll go into Q&A. So
Sure.
for folks who don't know Rohan, Rohan is a very seasoned leader with over 6 years of experience managing PMO, financial management functions for large-scale SAP deployments during his time at Accenture. Then he moved into the exciting world of SaaS, where he had an 8-year run at Zuora. He saw the company go from 100 million ARR through an IPO, a journey that I've seen is very exciting and is very rare to have. So congratulations on that. And then he led the transition at Zuora from a direct sales delivery motion to a partner-centric one. Then Rohan today, he's the global head of partnerships at Pigment. Pigment is a Series D startup. It's disrupting the enterprise performance management space. And Rohan, maybe we start there. After this amazing career in a lot of large companies, you're at Pigment today. Tell us a little bit more about Pigment. What does the company do? What are you currently focused on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the company, as I said, it's in the enterprise performance management space, and that really is about bringing the core financial data of the company into a platform and modeling different scenarios to be able to ultimately facilitate faster decision making that impact the core financials and P&L of the company. And so if you take a core P&L, there's a lot of collaboration required across the organization to actually accelerate decision making. So for example, in a SaaS company, the way you set territory and quota for sales reps and optimize that part of the process has a significant impact on your ability to achieve the top line revenue goals. Or in a product-based company, retail CPG type company, it's all about inventory turnover and optimizing inventory, aligning with demand. And so that obviously has a direct interlock between or back to the P&L. And so a product like Pigment, geared towards the enterprise, helping customers like Coca-Cola, Unilever, Gong, many others, Figma, with ultimately not just creating and manipulating that P&L, but doing so in a collaborative manner across the organization.
Got it. That sounds very exciting and a really nice customer base with Coca-Cola, right? So congratulations to the success that the company has had. Now let's see how that success has come about, right? You run a very key motion, which is the partnering at Pigment. So what is your partnering motion today at Pigment? Where are you focusing on? Where is the energy going towards?
Yeah, so it's primarily been with consulting partners, regional boutiques, GSIs as well in kind of the recent year. And I think a big reason for that is, we typically sell to the office of the CFO. And when you think about the space we're in, it's a well-established space, over 30 years old. There's already been built up a set of regional and boutique partners, as well as GSIs who actually specifically focus on this space. And so these are the types of partners who actually are working with our buyer center on a daily basis and understand where they're having pain today and what's broken with the process and is technology part of the problem. And so they have the closest proximity to our actual buyer base. Also, I would say from a company perspective, and I actually saw this at Zuora, maybe I'll start there. Zuora went public with, I think, 40%, give or take, of the overall revenue being professional services revenue. And the underlying kind of mechanics of a software company is that the margin sits in the software sale. The professional services organization at best will be a break-even organization. And so I think that was another factor at Pigment, was wanting to actually make sure there's scale and thinking about long-term enterprise value, knowing that professional services had to be a very small portion of the overall kind of revenue of the company. And so I'd say those are two of the key reasons why consulting partnerships is the main focus today, in addition to a little bit of referral partnerships and soon to come cloud marketplace as well.
Yeah, so that's very interesting, right? In this world of hyperscalers where everybody wants to partner with AWS, Microsoft, and a Google, you have taken kind of that approach that you're going with the RSIs, GSIs, consulting partners first. Can you tell me more, just build on that, like how did you think about hyperscalers being a second priority and then uh, going with the current strategy?
Yeah, so I think it was initiated by the desire not to scale our delivery internally exponentially. So really see the company's ARR grow at a much faster pace than the size of the PS organization. Now, I think what leadership started to see was that partners were also contributing to growth by bringing forward deals and also helping us win in the middle of the cycle. I think Dan was alluding to kind of similar perspectives there. And that ultimately led to then a doubling down on the consulting partner motion and saying, let's invest more here because not only can we scale delivery, we also can drive revenue growth from it. And I think we're seeing that play out with, somewhere between 25 to 30% of our new bookings actually come directly from partner source deals the last 3 to 4 quarters. And so I think that was a big part of it. We did absolutely look at cloud marketplace and think about how much do we invest there. One, we're single cloud, we're not multi-cloud today. And honestly, we're not getting a ton of pressure just yet in enterprise to be multi-cloud. So there were buyer signals there that were not like forcing us down that path. And I'd say the second thing is that just given that our buyer is typically the CFO, and not so much the CIO, although CIO may be a stakeholder. I think that guided us also to near-term consulting partners, but absolutely cloud marketplace will play a key role going forward.
Got it. Yeah, that's very interesting, right? Because most of the world today, when they think about partnering, they immediately gravitate towards some of these hyperscaler partners. So great. I'm glad this partnership strategy fits with the company vision. So as you think about these partnerships, especially with some of the GSIs and the consulting partners and the RSIs, it's a very complex motion. You can make the strategy, but the delivery and the execution piece is really critical. And one critical aspect to that is the planning. So when you approach annual planning with these partners, how do you go about doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's important to have a long-term vision for what you want your partner motion, we call it partner universe, what you want it to actually accomplish and contribute to the business. And so the first step was we defined that over a year ago, right? So across the entire business, how do we expect partnerships to actually impact the business, either in terms of contributing to top line growth or in terms of kind of efficiency, margin, cost basis or scale. So first is define that across the various motions. And then I think we had to define that over a multi-year goal. So if I want to get to 40% of the business being brought to us by partners, what are the actual partner motions that will stand up over time to get there, and how will they contribute to that 40%? And then I think you have a framing to get into a single year planning cycle, where I always start with the sales plan, right? What is the sales plan? How does it break down by geo, by region? Where do we expect the deals to come from in terms of segment, in terms of sales leader? And ultimately from that, I can then figure out what my expected partner contribution is to the business, coming from my kind of long-term vision. And I have the workings of a partner team goal or partner plan, which then also needs to tuck into how you think about and define your partner program. So how am I going to tier partners? What are the requirements to get there? What partners do I expect to be in which tier? And there's a little bit of art that goes into, I think, this part of the process, but that ultimately then rolls into individual business plans with your partners, right? And I think similar to how sales, for those who are familiar with it, the way sales will do their planning, they'll have a street quota, which is a roll up of all the individuals' reps quotas. Then they'll typically take some percentage of that to create the management quota. Then they'll typically take some percentage of that in terms of the internal commit to investors or what they actually think the financial plan is. And so I think we try to take a similar approach here in terms of having a kind of street plan rolling up ultimately into an internal commit, just knowing that not every partner is going to hit their goals. Some will overperform, some will underperform, but you want the proportions of partners in each tier to be a healthy one.
Yeah, that seems to be a very involved exercise, right? So you're going from a very high level goal, breaking it down into multi-year goals. From that multi-year, you said you want to break it out into single year goals and probably quarters. And then from quarters, you go to the execution layer, where you're working with every sales team and every partner team and going to the GOBD level to figure out how you want to execute upon that. So that intricate exercise, currently, how do you think systems, this is where WorkSpan comes into play a little bit, how do systems and tools play that role in that planning process? Because this is like so many inputs that you have and so many stakeholders that you have to cater to.
Yep. I think it plays a critical role. And maybe the analogy I'll use for it, maybe to use a little bit of a basketball term, the great facilitator is how I see tools playing into this. In that I think they will speed up your ability to actually create these plans, to analyze the data, to actually feel good that your plan is robust and that the various pieces link together well. Ultimately, then to not just create the plans, but to measure performance against them, which I think oftentimes is probably a misstep, right? People go through the exercise and a lot of effort to build business plans with your partners, but then what happens after that? And I think that's really key, because if you take the consulting partner example, the fundamental business model of a SaaS company versus a consulting company is completely different. SaaS company, very monthly, quarterly sales driven, whereas a services company, it's about the services bookings. And so ultimately, if they hit their services bookings numbers while getting all of the deals fed to them by an ISV, that's a great year. But from my perspective, I want partners actually contributing to our growth by bringing deals forward as well. So I think that's one of the key things too, is how do you align? I think Dan mentioned aligning sales and partners. I think equally aligning your partner team or your ISV organization and what your goals are to your partner goals. And I think the business plan is a great vehicle to do that, to align it, but then you actually have to measure it, right? So that you're keeping that muscle top of mind for them.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And what we have seen is like a lot of these partner plans currently nowadays start to live in WorkSpan, right? So we are using that tooling that you are now putting together in how do you manage that. So then now you have done everything, right? So you have the strategy, you have this beautiful plan, and now you have to go operationalize it, right? I know you started touching upon that response in the previous question, but go a little bit deeper on how you do that operationalization of the plan. How do you keep every stakeholder honest? Because again, there are these multiple people. You have the partner organization, you have the partner leadership, you have the sales organization, you have the sales leadership. How are you thinking about that?
Totally. So there's a few different views of data I look at there, right? So one is just the macro level team goals or partner organization goals and leading indicators contributing to that. So let's just go down the path of pipeline or partner sourced bookings one. Am I on track based on the overall leads registered by partners, the typical conversion rate, time to convert? How much pipeline do I have against the quarter right now? And what is that pacing percentage if I kind of prorate the quota? Am I on track? Am I off track? So one is at the really macro, like our contribution and commitment to the business, is that on track? And I think Dan very much alluded to this as well. Then if I think about the alignment with the sales side, if you put yourself in the shoes of an individual sales leader, while it's great that partners as a whole might be bringing business forward to Pigment, I, as a sales leader, only care that partners are bringing forward business into my region or into my territory. And so I think there's a key there in terms of who are the main partners you expect to work with a sales team. I don't think it's as specific as one partner will only work with one sales team, but who are the main players you expect to work with sales team A, B, or C? And how do you actually partner with those sales teams to jointly drive pipeline with your partners so that you are kind of landing the fish in their ocean, let's say. So I think that's a piece to how you actually start to then align at the sales team level. And we set soft targets in terms of how much pipeline we actually expect to drive into a sales team to then broker that type of collaboration in the field between sales teams and partner managers. And then I think on the other side of it with the partner business plans, we actually load those up into a tool. We track those, look at those on a weekly basis. having QBRs with your partners. But I think it even goes outside of the QBRs to have leading indicators. So if ultimately I measure partners on sourced one ACV as a key metric, and often the one that's the hardest to achieve, well, leading indicators to that are, am I seeing sufficient pipeline creation?
Right.
What is the win rate of this partner over time? Because you can see that that would vary greatly. There's some partners I have who, when they bring a deal, it closes like 90% of the time. And I have other partners who generate a lot of leads, but they don't close at a high rate. And so I think you have to factor for that when you're looking at leading indicators. But I think that's how I look at the partnership side of it, is really governing it like you would a sales team. I call it having a sales-like rhythm of business with your partners.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that last sentence, right? It's just the leading indicators, just like sales uses leading indicators, you're using the leading indicators for partnering specific. And then you made a very interesting point that make sure the leading indicators are partner specific, because some partners will have a higher win rate, some will have a lower win rate. So if you just look at pipeline, that might be a misleading metric, because
Yep.
pipeline for one partner means very different than what the pipeline for another partner is. And that's the distinction between the sales side. In sales, the whole company is uniformly using that pipeline metric, and the way they've defined pipeline is very uniform.
Yep.
Versus in partners, you have just crossed the four walls of your company. Therefore, there is so much distinction between those.
Yeah, very, very good point. And I like to even give a couple additional examples there. I would even say the segment a partner primarily focus on can greatly impact their ability to drive closure in some period of time. So, and our motion's, a couple of years old here, but we have partners who are enterprise focused and they are generating leads, but they are enterprise leads, which take 12 plus months to close. So they may not actually close a win this year, though there is good activity going on at top of funnel. And you have other partners who create fast deals, right? Further down market. So I think that's very interesting. And I think the other point you raised there is sales looks at the metrics on a macro level. I think that is such a critical point. When they look at win rates, when they look at time to close, when they look at average size of deal, I think the shortcut is you just look at it across the business, maybe across geo or sales team or segment. Typically, I don't think they look at it across kind of source of pipeline, which is something that we've really been tracking and communicating across the organization, is the relative win rate of partner versus inbound versus outbound, the size of those deals, the time to close. And I think that's a critical way that the partner team can actually show their impact to the business in terms of the efficiency of customer acquisition with this motion.
Great. So you seem to have a very good plan. I'll ask like a last couple of questions. You seem to have described the steps in very methodical manner. So you have the strategy, you have the goals, you have the strategy, you know how to execute, you have done these plans, you're keeping everybody honest to the plan. What is the hardest part that you find in executing the strategy?
The art of it, because it's so much art, right? As good as a plan you could have, with any given partner overall, things don't always go to plan. You can't control macroeconomic. You can't control, especially with partnerships, you're working with and enabling and trying to activate another organization. You might have personnel changes there. You might have attrition. You might have, business priorities change. And those are things you cannot control or predict when you create a plan. And so I think this is where the ability to have data at your fingertips, actually consume that data on an ongoing basis, and then react to where you're having success in various areas, whether it be pipeline generation, co-sell, or delivery, at least in our world. I think that's critical to ultimately finding the path to actually hit your number, your commitment to the organization.
Got it. So the art part of it is the hardest part, and the art part of it is something that if you master, you can keep all stakeholders honest, right?
I think that's fair to say.
Okay, and last question, right? What advice would you give to other people who are starting to, like, we are going into this Q3, Q4 timeframe where this topic will come up and will be front and center for a lot of companies? What advice would you give to your fellow partner alliance leaders?
I would say make finance your best friend so that you can really get close to the plans, and also articulate back to them the impact you can have to the business, because I think that absolutely resonates with the CFO or office of the CFO. So I think that's really important. Dan mentioned this, but work collaboratively across the organization and socialize and align your plans so that everyone is kind of committed and clear on where the focus and impact will be on the partner motion. I think those are some of the key things I'd share. And I would also say start early, because Q3, Q4 comes up very quickly. And by the time you know it, you'll be in the new year, and you don't want to be behind the ball trying to play catch up doing planning in, the start of Q1.
Yeah, and I think one of the flip sides of that is if you go into planning into Q1, then you don't have time to execute Q1, right? So if planning lingers on, one thing we probably didn't talk about is planning should be short and like sweet. Otherwise, it becomes very long and very painful, and it takes away from time that you can use to execute on your plans. So
Totally. Don't let perfection get in the way of progress.
well said, and that's probably the right note for us to bring back Chip. Chip, if you don't mind coming in and hosting some audience questions.
Yeah, fantastic. Great session, Rohan and Puneet. Yeah, we do have questions that have been coming in here. This one is from Ace again. So thanks for great content, Rohan. What specific metrics or KPIs do you rely on to track success throughout the year? How do you adjust if certain partners are falling behind? You talked about the 90% versus lower, maybe you can speak to that a little bit more as well.
Absolutely. So I'm happy to rattle off a few. And I think key in this is also communication across the org. So I do a twice a month global update across all of the cross-functional stakeholders, all the way up to LT. And in that, there's a repeated set of KPIs. So when I think about our consulting partner motion, I kind of separate into top of funnel, mid funnel, and then, post funnel or delivery. So in terms of top of funnel, overall pipeline generated by partners, pipeline accepted, closed won outlook. So, of the partner source deals that are in forecast or forecasted to close, how does that compare to where we'd expect to be? Win rate on partner sourced opportunities, and also how that trends over time. Average time to close, average sales price of partner source deals relative to other sources. Those are some of the key top of funnel metrics. Mid funnel, I'll be honest in saying this is still a bit of a work in progress, because part of what we found, we were trying to measure win rates when you get partners involved, but there's high variability there, right? On how early you get them involved, on what kinds of deals you might have partners get involved in, so on and so forth. So we're still working to refine what that looks like. We are, I'd say, they're more tracking the percent of won deals that actually have partners attached to them and that are proactively helping us win in the sales cycle. So we call it co-sell. Some may call it influence. And then on the delivery side, we have targets for what percent of our new logo or our projects actually have partners attached to it in a billable fashion. We use that metric because sometimes we may be ramping them on our paper, sometimes they may be on their own paper. So we do track that, and we do track the customer satisfaction on partner-led deployments as well, relative to doing it on our own paper. So those are some of the kind of key metrics we track.
That's great. That's a great list. I got to be taking notes. That's fantastic. Great. Let's see. We just had a question come in so I'm reading it as you are, from Abiram. What should a resale partner ideally commit to, say $1 million worth of opportunity brought in the pipeline, or $1 million of order book?
Yeah, good question. We are actually not doing resale today at Pigment, but if I maybe extrapolate this question a little bit between, do you measure pipeline creation or sourced won bookings? The way we did this both at Zora and at Pigment is new partner motion. I think there's obviously a lag effect in getting partners activated. So we focused more on pipe creation in the early year and a half. But we're in this place right now at Pigment where we're starting to soft measure bookings as we start to get more data on actual conversion rates of partner source deals and relative quality and all of that. And probably going into next year, there'll be a much greater focus, even comp-wise, on measuring sourced won ACV. So I think that translates also to how you think about partner business plans. Like ultimately, we are measuring them on partner sourced won ACV, but using opportunity creation as a leading indicator is kind of where we're at in our journey.
Great. Fantastic. So this is not a question, but a comment from Mahesh. Mamba forever. So
Love it. Yes, always.
And I think there's last question coming from Shailesh. So I'll read it.
yeah, okay.
Why have revenue as metrics for professional service? That defeats the purpose of revenue for SaaS, as ARR conflicts between SI and PS.
Yes, this is such a great point, Shailesh. So I'll even say it in stronger language, which is I firmly believe that having utilization, margin, or bookings targets for professional services is like the kiss of death for a partner motion, because the behavior it drives in a tough quarter is you end up with your professional services organization competing with partners. And I'm very, very fortunate at Pigment. We have really good alignment with our PS leaders. So we do not have that situation here, but it's something I would say you always want to keep your eyes on and ensure at all times your leadership team, investors as they are relevant, are really aware of, I don't think it's conscious decisions sometimes, but it's just, hey, we need to make sure that part of the business is profitable. Well, what is the knock-on impact of doing that is you're creating friction with your partners. And so rather than driving for profit, if they're underutilized, invest in upskilling your partners, invest in harvesting all the knowledge that sits in your PS org, use it to help accelerate or really build for the future when utilization does come back up.
Perfect. That was a great response. And I think Shailesh agrees.
Fantastic. Rohan, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you all. Great. Yeah, thank you all. This was great.
Great session. That's great. Well, so we are going to move on to our next topic, and it's our panel, which is fantastic. So let's bring in Asher. Hey, Asher.
Hey, Chip. How's it going?
Good. Very good. Pervez and Alina.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
Hi there.
All right. I'm going to. This is a fantastic group, and excited to hear, sort of how you're thinking about reacting to the conversation that's taken place so far, and take it away.
Super. Well, before we go on, Chip and I have a competition going on for the world's best partnerships moderator. So, that's happening. Yeah.
There'll be a vote later.
Exactly.
That's one of our poll questions.
Exactly.
So we'll go easy on you, Asher.
I know. All right. Hey, folks. My name is Asher Bhatia. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Partnership Leaders. We are the premier global community for partnerships. And in this session, we're going to take, because we've heard a little bit about partner strategy. We've heard a little bit about partner planning. We've heard a little bit about partner execution. And what we'll do in this session is understand the nuances that you should care about and think about when you're trying to build a strategy or when you're trying to align other stakeholders on the plan, and then things that you should watch out for when you're executing relentlessly and you're in the field, because all systems are a go. And the two questions we for sure will answer is asking for budget and getting it, and also best practices and tips for forecasting. Because when you have senior executives around you, the two things are kind of come for quite a bit. What do you need, and what are you going to do for me? So those two questions we'll answer to. I have the pleasure of having Pervez and Alina with me. Let's start with quick intros. 30 seconds. Alina, go.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Alina Everett. I am the Global Strategic Alliance Leader for our PwC relationship at iCertis. iCertis does contract management, contract intelligence, and I spent time previously leading global relationships with EY and Deloitte at Qualtrics, and then with EY at Microsoft. So very excited about the partner journey, and having started as a consultant, it's come full circle for me. Pervez, over to you.
Thank you, Alina. Well, thanks for having me, Asher, here. This is Pervez Alam. I am head of channels and alliances here at QA. QA is an end-to-end learning and AI enablement company. Prior to QA, I was at Accenture and IBM for almost a decade between those two companies, and was with a couple of startup companies prior to that, with a couple of exits. So it's kind of, for me, it's about half of my career has been on startups, half of my career has been on, these two companies, IBM and Accenture, back to a little bit more on the startup world right now.
Super. And if I, for our audience, you're actually kicking off your partner program at this new company. Is that correct?
That is correct. So, I mean, I am building that up right now. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Super. So this is great. This is a fantastic setup. We've got both partner pros, right? One's starting from scratch. The other one's like trying to get it to the next level. Let's jump in. So the situation is, this is partner planning time, or this is company planning time, right? And you have to now go work with other executives, right? Because you can't build a plan in a vacuum. You have to learn from your senior executives. You have to like figure out like what the priorities are. So Alina, kick us off. Like, what's your process for, and what should people watch out for?
Yeah, great question. And I think I'll just say, I know annual planning is sort of the topic du jour, but I think it's important for us to think about this process as continuous throughout the year. And so as much as I'm coming to the chief revenue officer at the start of fiscal planning saying, here's how we can meet our targets, here's the investment, that we think we'll need to, make good on that promise.
Yeah.
It's important to me to cultivate continuous relationships with those folks so that they know throughout the year how you're performing against those metrics you've aligned on, and then how the business is supporting those goals. So I would say for me, it starts with understanding the C-suite vision. What is the goal for the company for the coming year? Where are there maybe areas of softness or emerging strengths that we should be leaning into and leveraging, in my case, PwC's skills to bring thought leadership to that category. And then I'll build my plan around that strategy.
Okay, dive into a little bit of what are PwC skills. I'm generally interested.
Sure. Yeah, well, let me speak more broadly too about GSIs, because that's kind of
totally
my wheelhouse. And I would say it's similar across the board, right? They are such massive companies. These companies have anywhere from 300,000 to 500, 700,000 really plus employees across the world. So they have regional footprints where you need them. They have best practice cases from working with clients in all of your top industries. They have SMEs that you want to lean on and activate as part of your sales cycles. So it's more about retrofitting what your SaaS company does into that many-fold model. So simplifying the matrix and making sure that your company's, your C-suite's goals are mapping to where the areas of strength are. So PwC this year, we're super focused on government contracting, HLS, retail, banking and financial services, you name it. But really, when it comes to the GSIs, it's about paring down more than it is about expanding your remits, because the sky's the limit.
And then last thing for you before we get some insight from Pervez is talk a little bit about the planning cycle timing, because like some companies will align with you, others just are bigger, they just have different cycle times.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been a classic challenge and something that I've navigated since I started in partner world. The GSIs and especially the advisories will tend to align around a June calendar. So that's the start of the new fiscal versus a lot of SaaS companies are on the calendar year. So that means that when our GSIs are starting their planning process in the spring, we are well ahead of where we'll need to be to secure our investments for, fiscal 25. So to me, that comes with a few considerations. One, you'll know your partner's headcount early. And again, that's an important driver of, having regular QBRs and, making sure that where the KPIs are driving their business so that they can invest in additional headcount early, even without seeing that full year. You're also going to have a preview of their investments. So if they have marketing dollars that are going to go towards campaigns or events, you're going to have a little bit of a lens into where they're spending those resources and where you may need to augment. And so it's kind of a nice advantage because you can take that framework and see where you need to expand on it in your fiscal planning. So mine is happening now. We're thinking about, so September and October are typically when we make those decisions and make those asks of our CRO and CEO. So it's important for us to make the marketing development fund ask early. We need, X dollars in order to drive 30% more revenue for you this year. Here's what that ROI looked like, brass tacks by line. And if I can provide that kind of data, I can usually secure a pretty good investment.
Nice. Okay, so your advice is retrofit into the bigger partner's plan, and if the planning cycle is off, you may find yourself in year one catching up to it, but year two you can actually plan ahead of it. Fantastic.
Exactly.
All right, let's hear from Pervez. Pervez, you're in an interesting spot, right? So you have to gather resources and make a case, and there's no data or historical data to give them to you. So walk us through how you're thinking about getting resources.
Sure, absolutely. So just to take a one step back here,
Yeah.
so we were formed by the acquisition of 3 companies. So we are
Okay.
fully private equity backed. So essentially, we took a pot of money and acquired 3 companies, putting them together. The 3
Great.
companies are in the same space but different parts of that space. So, for
Okay.
instance, we do end-to-end learning. So we span from self-paced online learning through experiential, like hackathons, labs, workshops,
Okay.
through till instructor-led training, like all-up training. So we acquired 3 companies on those 3 different, doing 2 different areas, and we're putting that whole proposition together and going forward. I was brought in by the CEO and the CRO of the company. So essentially, we do have large direct sales teams across all these companies. But as we look into the future, our hockey stick growth comes from channels, right?
Yeah.
The 2 key channels for us are hyperscalers, the usual suspects, AWS, Microsoft, Google, or GSI partners like EY, McKinsey, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, etc. For me, in this build mode of saying, okay, this is where a lot of our revenue in the future in the hockey stick is going to come through channels, right? And if you look again, personally, for me, I've been pretty much lifelong a consultant and more on the sales leadership side. So I've taken a very much about this sales orientation to it. So I've been working on what we call the revenue waterfall, like what's our plan for the year. And then revenue waterfall basically determines for me, by quarter, by the year, what pipeline that we need to drive as a company, and then what portion of that pipeline we would want from coming from which channels, and that allows me to identify the budget I need, the people that I would need to support to kind of hit that ambition. Allows me to understand where the gaps in the process and approach are, where the tooling gaps are. That all comes together to kind of say, okay, this is how I go about building it. If that's my ambition, here's the piece of revenue that I want to support, how that all falls together. So that's essentially my
Playbook. Yeah, this is great. So let's ask the tough question, right? Inevitably, we're all going to find ourselves with that one C-suite person that does not want to work with us, right? So what do you do then?
So it's pretty simple for me. Every business is human, right? It's about a human person talking to another human person. When I see that I'm going with a plan and I got a lot of questions, or I know somebody is not aligned, then you go and talk to them one-on-one. You talk to them and understand what your priorities are, and how are those supported or not supported, but what I am trying to do. And if sometimes, it's possible that the priorities overall that we are trying to hit are a bit different, then you just for that particular division, you may make a conscious decision of saying, great, we would not support a budget from that perspective, which is an okay answer. But most often than not, 90% of the time we walk away saying, yep, that makes sense. I understand why you are doing this. Or on the flip side, I might walk out and say, great learning, I wasn't thinking that aspect, let's include that, or let's exclude that, and go from there. But it always, my experience has been, it's always worked out. I've never seen a situation where we got to a kind of a log jam.
Yeah.
I can add to that too, because I've definitely been through this with CROs or sales leadership who just don't quite get the partner model, and it's not because they don't want to or they're not intelligent about it, but it's usually because they've had a bad experience with partners, or they just haven't seen the bottom line impact to their group. So I address that in a couple of ways. One, I try to have a one-on-one, and see kind of what is their history with partners, where have they seen them succeed or maybe fall short at prior companies. Is there something that you can kind of get to the bottom of and elucidate for them? And then I will also bake into my plan on the sell with side the 360-degree partnership. So making sure that if there's an account executive on the CRO's team that is selling to my partner, so if they're selling to PwC, we're selling with PwC to other customers, I make sure we're meeting globally as a team every month, and we, share intel, and we figure out what is the pulse of the business, where are we trying to head as a unit, so that everyone's raising each other up. And I've seen CROs really, CROs and or sales leaders kind of shift their tone once they realized, hey, we can be collaborative and work as a team here.
So, okay, so I'll share two pieces of insight that I've found over the last few months, right? One is that when you're dealing with a C-suite team or your executives and they're being difficult and you're also at a point where you're starting the program, which is like pervasive situation, right? Sometimes it happens that it's not the partner team or the partner function. Like, this is like juggling, right? Like, you're juggling 3 pins, and when you add the 4th pin and you don't have the capability and the proficiency, everything is going to fall, right? So a lot of times, and I think, and it'd be good to get your point of view, is the business has to be comfortable for taking on yet another motion, right? And that's not, I mean, we all say like, hey, let's get the C-suite to align on it. That part is great. That's one piece of it, right? But then when you actually try to go do it and you don't have the process in place or the revenue flows mapped out, and like, how does this thing actually materialize, right? Like, you're causing friction for people in their day-to-day, and the partner lead has to think about this, and you have to be bold to point it out that things aren't working, and then you have to confront. And because we are very empathy focused connectors, right? Like this is a skill that we have to work on. That's my point of view. What do you two think?
Yeah, I can go first here. So, Asher, you're exactly right. So essentially, it's about taking the overall plan and then kind of tying it back to that. Like, how is the investment I'm talking about the company has to make across many other things they could be doing? How is that supporting the overall goal, right? Which gaps am I servicing to that goal, and how am I showing it? It comes back to metrics. I know we'll talk a little bit more about measures and metrics. So how do you prove it that it's going that direction? And I can tell you that taking two different lenses, right? When I was back at an IBM or an Accenture, the goals were something more around like, hey, I'm number whatever 6 or 7 in the ecosystem globally. We want to be number 1 or 2, right? So your investments, your perspective, how you're driving is towards how do I go from the 7th position to a number 1 or 2 position, right? Because a lot of the motions are already in place in the ground. People are doing work in the field. People are very engaged. We are running millions of dollars of business together. But how do we go up? And a lot of that becomes like, how are we being measured by the market? Not just our own revenue, but how are we being measured by the market? How are we managing the partnership metrics together, right? When it comes to a more of a build situation that I am in, it's a little bit more, I would say, for me to get out of the ground and really prove the model is a little bit more, revenue centric or more sales centric, more pipeline build centric towards my organization, saying, okay, how am I going to go build, be a part of the solution to this hyper growth we're looking at, right? Yeah. What pipeline am I driving? And then, of course, sales is the biggest metric here. But for getting to pipeline, there are some earlier metrics around, am I having the right meetings? Am I having the right, intros from my partners or into my partners? So there's a little bit of a different, I would say, maturity level, the different, stage of the curve that we are in.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears because I feel like we could talk for an hour on just this topic alone, right? Now, the thing that I really want to talk about, and I want to be conscious of time, is budget, right? And so you've made a budget ask, right? You've said, hey, look, this is my partner strategy. Here's what type of resources I'm looking for. Now I want budget, right? And so now you have to go have that difficult conversation with the CFO, basically, right? And so let's start with you on tips to have a difficult conversation with the CFO. Let's start there.
Absolutely. Well, I think about this conversation in a similar way to the way I think about negotiations. If you've done your homework, it should be a pretty painless conversation, right? You're
Yeah.
basically just reporting the news. Here's, here are the investments we made last year. I think about things like, again, joint events sponsoring, SAP Spend Connect is one that we're doing coming up together. Events like that, that's an ask. Sponsoring things like POCs, joint POCs, to help with that barrier to entry with customers who might be a little bit more cost sensitive or might need a little bit more encouragement. So if you have a model from last year, this is obviously the dream scenario if you're not in Pervez's shoes and building this from scratch. And you can say, here was the ROI for each of these investments. And ideally, you've been sharing that, communicating that throughout the year. If you are building it from scratch, I would just say very important to kind of map what you think the dollar value of X activity will map to in terms of sourced revenue or influenced revenue, which we haven't even gotten into. But for GSIs, especially, land and expand is the model, much more so than tossing a lead over the wall. So how do I show that, these investments are going to lead to expansions over time, 3-year, $10 million deal versus your one-off $500K deal. So that's kind of, I need to paint that picture. And if I've painted that picture on paper, the conversation is, pretty smooth generally.
So my experience is CFOs deal with money all day long, right? And two, they're not looking for friends. They're just looking for results. Pervez, would you agree, or how do you tackle the CFO convo?
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely a fair statement. CFOs are looking for results, and how are you tying it back to results? My goal here in this case has been, let's start with the CFO's plan, right? I'm sitting down with that revenue, waterfall model that was created overall, and then I'm basically plugging in through that, right? Saying, okay, how are you going to reach that? Because you don't really have a support to reach that component of it. I am your solution, right? So kind of, that's one angle of doing that. The other part I'll tell you in my case right now, I would say that I'm still in that honeymoon period where we're building it, and the company has recognized it's a need for it. There needs to be some budget for it. So we essentially are getting a little bit of what we want for now, but in the next year might be a different conversation in terms of what we did, where we did. So the harder question is like, and I'll go back to the worldview. Let's say back in my previous life before this company, we think about, in terms of these notions of blue dollars and green dollars, right? So any budget has both components. So if I need people, if I need, a certain amount of, a new technology to be installed and then run, there's levels of blue dollars that goes in, and there's levels of green dollars to support, meetings, to support events, etc. Sometimes, the blue dollars are just like, hey, we did X last year, let's just do X plus 1, and then we'll give it to you, right? Easier. The green dollars are harder because sometimes you don't know, you cannot predict what is there. So one of my secret sauce, I would say, is that, particularly for events, we can only predict so much into the future. And I have gotten into that scenario multiple times in the past, where we are in the middle of the, financial year, and a partner will come back and say, hey, you have this opportunity to take this pole position because somebody, dropped out, and you are my favorite. I'll get you that pole position here, but it cost you 50 grand or like 150 grand, right? And I just didn't budget for it because I never knew about it.
Yeah.
But I want that. How do you go about doing it? That's the harder conversation when we come in front of a CFO, because they're going to ask you, what are you going to get out of it? And you never planned for it. Now explain it to me, right? It's very hard to get at that point. So one of the secret sauce I have done is I would, go and invent events for the future, which I don't even know what those are, right? But I'll have a good business case around what those events are. Maybe it's a customer, like a business circle or something that we would host a customer summit, in third quarter, and I'm putting money into that. And then like along the execution, I might just steal that money, put it somewhere else, right? But having those kind of buckets up front has helped me. Now, like in today's scenario, we're in a very different scenario of build mode, but this is something about an ongoing, business. So.
Okay, this is great. So we've discussed a little bit about how do you align on strategy, right? Or how you build strategy, and then how do you work with others to get that plan in place, right? Let's talk a little bit about execution, right? And I have two questions, given the time that we have. Is one is how do you track and top tips for that? And then number two is, what do you do when things go wrong? Because inevitably something's going to go wrong, because there's 4 or 5 different motions running inside of a company. They're all not hitting at the same time. And we're all feeling like in partnerships that we are the worst, but like there's other things also happening, right? So let's kick this off with Lena. So Lena, tell us how do you track? And then how do you justify when things go wrong?
Yeah, I think this is such a good question, and it's varied so much for me at each company, just based on the tooling that we use. Microsoft obviously has sort of its in-house CRMs and things like that that aggregate, how partner impact is coming together on deals. At Qualtrics, I think we used a combination of Clary and Salesforce. iCertis, we're using a similar combination. So I think just having those systems down, being really comfortable, getting your hands dirty and playing in those, pulling reports for yourself on, at least a weekly basis, and sort of seeing where things are trending. That's a really important tool for me, just when it comes to performance. And I would say, in order to look at that data intelligently, you have to have aligned on KPIs with your alliance at the beginning of the year, or at any point. It's never too late. But I would say, not that you can ever sort of assign a partner a metric or KPI, but you can sort of come to a mutual agreement about a growth target that seems reasonable for you both. Services revenue on the SI side, licensing or consumption revenue on the SaaS side, maybe number of deals done, percentage of lead attach, which I know was just spoken about a little bit ago. So having those KPIs defined will help you look at your data systems with an intelligent eye, and then being transparent and sharing that performance with your alliance cohort can allow you to course correct throughout the year. So if you're seeing way more softness in banking when you thought it would be your strongest industry for the year, then maybe you think about doing a joint trade show, or you think about sending execs from your top banking accounts to a sports game with some of your leaders who can really talk about our AI strategy, things like that. So I think there are always ways to course correct if you're heavy on data. And where I've seen partner managers go astray sometimes is just, not being comfortable with getting into the weeds of those systems and calling out the weak spots that they're seeing.
Super.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just add that, exactly, the same. And that it's, at this point in time, we are looking a lot in the pipeline, right? Because you're in a pipeline creation mode. So how is that impacting? And then some of the leading metrics to it, that are we having enough meetings? Are we having enough activities with those partners up front? Are we getting intros, both sides? And our thesis is it's going to increase deal sizes. So how's that panning out? When there's a partner attached, are we getting those deal sizes up? And another metric, which is an easy, I would say, low-hanging fruit, is we do, there is business that is happening with partners, but we're not being attached, or we're not, counting it, because historically nobody was really looking at it. So it's an easy metric for us to get to show momentum even back to our channel partners and say, look, we already do this much business. Now we need more support from you.
So let's just, I guess we need to wrap up too. I would just say, when you have an oh shit moment and things are just like going all over the place, and you're just missing badly, and some things are in your control and some things not in your control, I feel like you need to make a list of like things that are in your control and things that are not in your control. And then I feel like you just need to go and have that transparent conversation, not shy away from it, because the worst thing you can do when things aren't going the right way is actually not bringing it up, because that's when a surprise takes place, and executives hate surprises. Alina?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Like, it should be continuous, and the last thing you want to do is sugarcoat, because it won't help anyone. The reality is going to be the reality. So all you can do is report the news, say what you're doing about the things you can control, and then flag with the teams that maybe have influence over the things you can't control. See if you can get support from other areas of the business, because at the end of the day, everybody wants this to be a success, right? So I think phoning a friend is a really important thing to keep in your back pocket with these situations.
Perfect.
Yeah, Alina is exactly right. And then all I will add is that business happens at the unit of business is the account, right? Everything comes together at an account. So essentially, if there's any problem, I try to kind of trace the path down to which accounts and what account, right? How are we going to solve for that? Because ultimately, what is the customer impact? Yeah, there's some impact to me. There might be some impact to the company. There might be some impact in the partnership. But what is the account? How is the account getting impacted? Or a set of accounts getting impacted? And then I find that makes the conversation between internally in my company or with my partner much easier, because now we have some objective, items to drive there.
Super. All right. I think we're at time. I'll just leave the audience with just one thing. We're talking about partner revenue flows, right? And just note that the revenue flow does not end when the deal is closed. It actually goes all the way till the revenue is recognized. And if you're struggling with that or you're curious about it, go talk to your CFO. They'll help you understand exactly how revenue flows. And then you'll start with the rules of engagement and all the way till the money shows up in the bank and gets paid. And that, I think, would be an awesome thing for you to show like the next level of maturity as a leader. Chip, back to you.
Yeah, fantastic.
Alina,
Gosh, I'd love to, we have some questions, but we are right up against time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Yeah, why don't we just email them out to everybody?
Sure. Yeah,
that may be the simpler and more efficient
questions and some answers, and yeah. Fantastic session, Asher, Alina, Pervez. Really great. Really appreciate you guys sharing all of your insights and thoughts about really just great stuff.
Super.
Thank you, Chip. Excited.
All right, folks, go get that budget and go crush your numbers.
That's right.
Yeah. Will do. Good luck, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Amit, what a great EBS
Indeed.
today. Let's see if that's working. Oh, okay. All right. Fantastic. So maybe let's do a quick recap. I think we've been taking some notes along the way, and your session with Dan was terrific. I think, I loved his sort of, three components to talk about, make sure you're looking at customer lifecycle, partner lifecycle, and then territory coverage. Just a great one. And I also like this, don't be transactional. Think really about how you're building a sustainable business together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the flexibility piece, 20% of time to do experiment and do new things. And that's how they've been able to do Gen AI and build the Gen AI strategy with AWS, with their GSI ecosystem. Great job there.
Yeah.
I also thought Rohan's session was really powerful with how they have driven planning with the GSI. So this is an example of Boomi with hyperscalers first, but Rohan with an example with GSIs first and SIs first, right?
Yeah, and really, I mean, he was really terrific at sort of bringing it down to exactly, what some very specific operational kinds of things that to take your strategy and turn it into something executable. I loved his summary at the end of, here are the KPIs. I think he rattled through like 7 or 8 KPIs that were really powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with Pervez, right, the fact that he's seeing the ecosystem as an exponential way to grow. And I think that's exactly the right aspiration to have when you are kind of planning your team organization, especially when you get a greenfield to do like he's getting one at QA.
Yeah. Yeah. And Alina talking about just so many good topics, but making sure that you get the right processes and systems in place to be able to measure what's going on. Measurement is so important.
And I like the fact that with her services partner, she's doing both sell to and sell with. So it's very interesting to see, for me personally, like how channel partners have come from a typical sell to sell with, and how GSIs, in addition to doing sell with and advisory and all those important things, but then also building joint solutions, doing sell to, which is a 360 eventually at the end of the day. She talked about that very well.
Yeah. So great sessions. A couple of things just to share for everybody that's in this planning process. First item, and we've got the QR codes up there, is we put together a template for an executive briefing around your strategy that takes a lot of these concepts that we talked about today and puts it into a slide deck, right? That you can start from and use whatever makes sense to you, and we love your feedback on it as well. It's a growing and continuing document. So, and then Partnership Leaders has a definitive guide to partnership planning, which is fantastic. Great, spreadsheets and a number of really good assets there. So check that out, download that. We'll keep the QR code up here for a minute. And then Amit, you talked a little bit about cloud sales planning, and we have a model that's again, it's a spreadsheet. You can put in your baselines and then make adjustments, and it shows your revenue adjusts as you go.
Absolutely, these are remarkable assets. If you're making a business case for your partnering team, go use that briefing template. It has a lot of good use cases, examples, processes, data points, reports from graphs and charts from prominent analysts, and data points that you would need to justify that business investment. And then these spreadsheets will give you the rigor in your plan.
Yeah. Two other quick things. One is if you're talking about partner revenue flows, we'd love to have a conversation. If you're looking at how are you going to organize, how are you going to manage, how are you going to scale your revenue with partners, we'd love to have a conversation. We have just a ton of great customers that have been able to build their business and grow their business on WorkSpan. There's a QR code there for a demo. We'd love to have a conversation. We're ready to, operators are standing by. So we'd love to have a chat with you. And then finally, a couple of things coming up that we want to highlight. So October 22nd and 23rd in Dallas, the Ultimate Partner Live event. Going to be a great event there, 2 days. And our CEO and co-founder Mayank is going to be on stage on the first day with Jason Rook from Microsoft and Amy Ballo from Cisco. So it's going to be a really good event. And then there's a webinar, Partnership Leaders event webinar coming up on November 6th, and a QR code. So got a ton of QR codes. We'll share all these slides and links. I think they've been shared in the chat, and we'll share them in the deck afterwards as well.
Yeah, and Chip, I want to end on one quick note and personal gratitude. As you know, we woke up to the news of also Ratan Tata in India, passing away. He was a scion of the Tata House, and I am from a place called Tata Nagar or Jamshedpur. It's the steel town where the Tata established the whole company for steel making and automotive and everything else. I studied on a Tata scholarship as well, so tremendous gratitude. And we all know the Tata Consultancy Services was something that he founded alongside and took it public and all that. So a tremendous titan of the industry passed yesterday. Yeah. So
yeah,
gratitude from a personal point of view as well.
Yeah, thank you for noting that, Amit.
Thank you.
And I think with that, we'll sign off. And thanks everybody for joining. Been a great session. And again, our thoughts are also with the challenges everybody in the South is facing with the hurricanes. So,
thank you, everybody. Look forward to the next CBS. Take care. Bye.